Book of Romans. This is the Romans Education Part 2. And this is the Addendum Part 2 to Session 23. Okay, so without skipping, let's just pick right up where we left off, because what I was doing is I was giving you that list. Let me catch that back up on the PowerPoint so that we can see that. It was my point 5, and so here's the thing I want to do. And so God made Adam in his image, and he did. So let me just show that to you. So God created man in his own image. God created him. Male and female created he them. They're all created in the image of God. And then point 2 is that Adam passed his image down to his offspring. You see that in Genesis 5:3. And Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and called him Seth. And then by extension, Adam also passes down the image of God to his offspring, and we're going to see that in Genesis 9:6. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. This is more than 1,500 years after the garden. And he's still talking about men being in the image of God. Now we're going to come back to this last reference because this is super important, but we'll do that in order. So God's original intent was to create some creatures like him, not him, but like him, in his likeness. And that, as I said to you before, doesn't have anything to do with the physical. In other words, it is to represent him and represent his character. And so these creatures, these humans, this mankind that God is creating are his proxies, so to speak. Look, there's two issues in the image. Let me get rid of this. I didn't finish that, by the way. If you'll remind me at the end, for those of you that want to get that, just remind me that I didn't finish that. So, now I forgot what I was doing. What were we talking about? Oh, it's not on the notes. There's two issues. This is the overarching issues in the image of God. Number one is that we reflect God's image, and number two is that we represent him in the work that he has told us to do. We would call that our godly labor. In other words, so we are reflecting his image. That's what it means to be in the image, and we are representing him. So when Adam was here, that's why I said that people are his proxies. They are his, what's another word that we could use from this? His representatives, right? That's what it means to be in his image and made in his likeness. So every human being is in the image of God. And so when God created man, his intention is that every single human, though different in lots of other ways, some are tall, some are short, some, have these features and that features, and have different color hair and different color eyes. All those physical things don't matter. Because, and even in their personality, this person's an extrovert, this person's an introvert, this person is kind of, all of that, it doesn't matter. Though they're different in other ways, they would all be a reflection of him. That's the purpose of every human. That's why God made people. That is the question as to why are we here. Now, we're still going to answer the question, who am I? You are the image of God. And that's who you are. That's really who you are. And what am I doing here? You are made to be his reflection and his representative. That's the answer to that question. So I'm going to say it this way. To be human, just to be human, is to be the image of God. To be human is to be the representative of God. And that's what all of us were created to be. It has nothing to do with how good a job you're being at being his representative. You can do a lousy job of representing God. That is still who you are. Think about the tape measure. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how lousy it is. It decides it doesn't want to measure stuff anymore. It's still a tape measure. Sorry. So the decision doesn't change. So getting back to the image of God, being the reflection of God, folks, is no small thing, because it is God's desire to fill, in the beginning you only get this idea, to fill the earth with a whole species that are nothing but reflectors of Him and His glory. Now we find out, guess what? He's going to fill the heavenly places with them too. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? That the whole creation would be filled with reflectors of the image and glory of God. Now, in view of that, look, that means there is real significance attached to us. I have to be careful how I get into this, because I don't want to skip. I don't want to skip something here that's important. Think about a mirror. A mirror in and of itself cannot project anything. You know what it needs? It needs an object. The mirror can't produce the light by which you can see it. All that has to come from outside the mirror. Whatever the mirror is reflecting doesn't originate with the mirror. So why am I saying it that way? Because I want two things to be in your mind. Being the image of God is a high, holy thing. More than you imagine yet. At the end of this session, I hope you will. But don't get the big head about that, because you're just the reflection. You're not the original object. So I just want to strike that balance. Is it a privilege to do that and an honor? Oh, yeah. But it's really not about us. It's really about Him. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of strike that balance. Point 7 in your note taker. The fall did not erase the image of God. Now I'm going to take you back. I told you we would come back and look at that, and here we are. We're going to take a look back at that Genesis chapter 9. And just to get you in a time frame, in Genesis chapter 9, this is when Noah and his family get off the ark. So guess what? The flood has come. It's wiped out life. Those 8 souls that are on the ark, now it's Noah and his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. They're all going to disembark from the ark. And now God is going to give them a commission. Here it is, Genesis chapter 9 and verse 1. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Does that sound familiar? So it wasn't just for Adam and Eve. Guess what? Now it's going to be for Noah and them. Why? Because they're the ones that are left here to do this. By the way, is this strictly up to Noah's wife to do this? No. This is going to be for their kids, and then for their kids' kids, and on it goes. Mankind. I'm just making that point. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, and upon that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. It sounds like, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and the fowl of the air. It's the same kind of terminology, right? All right. Now let's take a look at it in verse 4. But flesh with the life thereof. Now notice what this is coming. We're coming off the boat, and God goes, okay, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and have dominion over everything. And then he's going to say this, but the flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof. He says, you know what? You shall not eat that. In other words, you know what? He is going to tell them anything on the earth. You know what? Now that they got off the boat, they can have hamburger. But don't eat the blood. To this day, you know what we still do in slaughterhouses? When an animal is butchered, they bleed those animals out. This is where that came from originally. But God didn't do it for the purpose of sanitation. You know what God did? Why did God do this? Because there was something about the life of the animal being in the blood. And so he says, and surely, verse 5, your blood of your lives will I require, at the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. You know what he's saying here? If a beast kills a man, if a man kills a man, if you kill your brother. By the way, have we had any instance of that in the past? You're in Genesis 9. Do we have anybody's brother killing their brother? I mean, talk about a little uncomfortable. He says, you know what? I'll require their blood for that. You know what this is? This is capital punishment. This is now a life for a life. I want to keep reading because I want you to understand. Whoso shed, this is the very next verse. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. Why, God? For in the image of God made he man. You know what God is saying? I made this whole species of humans, and they are my image. And that makes them different from everything else that I have done. And here's how different it is. If you take the life of one of my imagers, you will pay with your life. Are you starting to get a picture now about how big a deal this is to God? See, if you're a secular humanist and God is not in the picture, what makes your life any better than that of any other animal? I mean, in the science class, you've gone to all the trouble to show us that there's no real difference. We're just all a cosmic accident. Well, if that's how you really feel about it, then you know what? You have no rights and protections. Unless you're going to extend those same rights and protections to the ants that come into your house and get in your cupboard, or the mice that burrow into your pantry or closet, or the cockroaches. I mean, if we're all just a cosmic accident, they deserve the same rights and privileges you do. Let's be honest. So you know what? Let's all get signs and we'll go down to City Hall. You know what? Rats' rights. You know what? Ants' rights. All those, but don't step on that bug. Why? He has rights. You know what? But I could step on that bug. He's a cosmic accident. Well, if you are, then there is no real consequence to something stepping on you. You can't have it both ways. Your argument has to work. It can't be raining and not raining at the same time, folks. That's why you have a brain. So, I'm not talking to you necessarily. I'm talking to those folks who are going to watch this video and they're going to disagree with this, but they have no logical argument to do so. What they've done is they just know there's some stuff they don't like and they don't care if they can rationally explain that away. All right, so let's get back to this, because there is intrinsic, if we are in the image of God, folks, there is intrinsic value and importance to every person on the planet. To everyone on the planet. If you are the image of God, to him, that is such a big deal that if someone takes your life, they will pay with their own. If an animal, this is the way it was in the law, by the way. If a man was killed by an animal, you know what happened to the animal? Paid with its life. Now, did God treat the animals the same way? Well, let me ask you. Suppose a man killed another man's cow. Did God say, put him to death? No, what did he have to do? He had to replace the cow. He had to pay for what he took. But he didn't get killed over it. Why? Because cows aren't in the image of God. Listen to me. Listen to me. I'm going to make a statement here. I should have put it on the notes. I didn't. I already rearranged them 3 times. I was lucky. I still came up with 10 things for you to fill in, okay? So here's the thing. We look at that and we say, God loved us. Even when we were sinners, He loved us. Do you know why? Did He love you because you were a sinner? Did He love you because you just have this personality that is just so great and cool? He just, just had to love you. He just couldn't help it. Was that it? No. He loved you when you're a sinner because, you know why He loved you when you were a sinner? See, we say, well, He just did, because we think God has this just little tender emotion for sinners. Do you know why He loved you? Listen, I'm telling you the truth here. Do you know why He loved you when you were yet sinners? Because you are His imager. Whether you want to be and whether you function that way is beside the point. You are His tape measure. Get that? And so God said, and you say, I don't think that's why He loved me. Well, let me ask you this. Did any of the angels sin? Any of them getting saved? Wait a minute. They were here first. Is there any redemption for a fallen angel? Do you ever ask yourself why? Well, because He just really liked us. Why? Because we're just neat and cool. I mean, we're made of dirt, and who can't love that? No. Because we, by virtue of who we are His image. And that's worth saving. Are you with me? You say, well, angels are pretty important. You're not His image? If you mess up, well, let me just use the Psalm 82 stuff. You're going to die like men. That's what's going to happen. See, that puts a whole new spin on it, doesn't it? All of a sudden now, it's not, God just looked down and went, you people that are my enemies and that are unrighteous and that are promoting ungodliness in this world, who blaspheme me, who by your life take my name in vain, not to mention the profane use of my name in your mouth, and your activities which are continually despicable and evil, and there is nothing redeemable about you. I love you. On what basis? You just, I don't know, I just do. Really? You think that's how God operates? He loves you even when you're a sinner because you are His imager. And that's worth redeeming. Don't get the big head. Don't get to thinking you're all that. There is a reason. And you say, but if every human is an image of God, and God values that, so values that if you kill one of His imagers, you will pay with your life. He so values that even though you may, you know what, you may be completely opposed to Him in your in Adam status and completely devoid of any desire for God whatsoever, He still cares about, because of what you were made to be. Exactly. That's the reason He cares. You didn't think that it was so unfair that God just arbitrarily decided to love you and not the angels. Did you really think it was that capricious? Did you really think God was picking winners and losers? Did you really think God was just kind of rolling the dice? Makes you glad you weren't an angel, doesn't it? Okay, well, see, I'm going to refer you back to point 1 and 2. Everything God created was for His good pleasure. And he wanted to do that. He did. And he had a purpose for that. But you know what? There is a special place that we hold with him that is not held by his other creatures. And that means when we mess up, because of who we are, his image, a redemption, a whole redemption has been planned for you. We're worth redeeming. All right, I wasn't going to tell this story. It was in my notes, and I didn't want to tell this story. It's a joke. It's not a great joke, but I wanted you to get it. Here's a guy that goes to the ball game, and they've got all those little portalettes out there, for the men and women. And, it's been a long game, and a guy decides, you know what, he needs the facilities. So he goes to the facilities, and when he stands up and pulls his pants up, a dollar bill drops out of his pocket into the toilet. My last dollar. So he opens up the door, and he looks over, and he sees his friend, and he says, "Hey, loan me $20. And the guy pulls out a $20 bill and hands it to him, and the guy turns around and throws it in the toilet. And then he rolls up his sleeve, and he reaches in, and he fishes out the 1 and the 20. And the guy goes, "What are you doing?" He said, "You didn't think I was going to stick my hand in there for just $1, did you?" And I know it's terrible. But that's kind of the point. If it's, you know what? There are things that have value. Now, I'm not saying that when you have the dollar, it wasn't worth $1, but I mean, I know that's just a poor illustration, and and someone is right now. Just it's bad. I get it. But God is when He says, you know what, I'm looking at all of my creation, and you know what, I want to fill my creation with those who reflect my glory and represent me, that exhibit my character. I want to give that to, I want to fill the universe with that. So that everywhere the creation looks, it sees that being reflected over and over and over again. And God says, and that is a really big deal to me. It's such a big deal that if you shed the blood, which is synonymous. Why is that synonymous? Because of Leviticus 17. For the life of the flesh is in the blood. He says, I've given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. The whole issue of life is in the blood. And if you take someone's life and you take the life of my imager, you're going to pay with your life. Now, I created the cattle, but if you kill a cow, we're not going to take your life over that. I created all these other things. And if you kill one of them, you know what? It's not okay. There's a penalty for that, but we're not going to take your life. But if you kill my imager, let me ask you, here's a king, and he sends his representative to another place and says, here's the message from the king. And they kill his messenger. Chop him up, put him in a bag, tie the bag to the horse he came in on, and send the horse back. When the king sees what's happened to his representative, how does he feel about that? You know why? Because this guy was representing the king, and when you did it to his representative, it's like you were doing it to him. That's how your Father is looking at you. You are my representative. You are my image. And if you're doing it to them, you're doing it to me. By the way, didn't we hear something like that back over in the Gospels? Whosoever, in that, Lord, he was talking about the believing remnant. He said, I was in prison, you didn't visit me. I was hungry, and you didn't feed me. And I was naked, and you didn't clothe me. And they said, Lord, when did we see you in prison and not visit you? And when did we see you naked? And he said, 'In that you have not done it unto these, you have not done it unto the least of these. You have done it unto me. And he said, in that you have not done it unto these, you have not done it unto the least of these. And he said, in that you have not done it unto these, you have not done it unto the least of these. And he said, in that you have not done it unto these, you have not done it unto the least of these. And he said, in that you have not done it unto these, you have not done it unto the least of these. And he said, in that you have not done it unto these, you have not done it unto the least of these. And he said, in that you have not done it unto these, you have not done it unto the least of these. And he said, in that you have not done it unto these, you have not done it unto the least of these. And he said, in that you have not done it unto these, you have not done it unto the least of these. And he said, in that you have not done it unto these, you have not done it unto the least of these. And he said, in that you have not done it unto these, you have not done it unto the least of these. And he said, in that you have not done you haven't done it unto me. Now you know what you find out? You find out because you're the image of God, you are his representative. And God means to take all of that seriously. Okay, I need to move on. So in Bible school, here's what I learned about the image of God. And I'm just going to put it up on the board real quick. And the reason you need to see this is not so you can learn the error that I learned in Bible school, but I want you to understand the answer that a secular humanist would give you today when you said, on what basis do we have rights? Because they do have an answer for that. And I want to give you the answer. You know what? The funny thing is, I learned that answer in Bible school. They taught me the secular humanist answer. And then that got into our society and it began to govern it. I'm going to show you that. So I'm going to walk you through that. So here are the things that constitute here are the things that constitute you having such dignity and worth that you are deserving of certain rights and protections. First of all, that you have a consciousness, that you are self-aware. You're not just, scum floating on top of the water with no real self-concept, but you have that. Here's the next thing. Yeah, if you ever watch Star Wars or any of those sci-fi things with the robots, the androids, they all, in all of these, when they're going to get treated like a human, it's when they become what? Sentient. It includes this, but it's now, the ability to reason on our own. Not just something else that's influencing us. Here, and that includes, let me just go ahead and put it up here, intelligence and rationality. That was a part of what gave us human dignity. Here's the next one. Conscience and morality. It's part of the great human experience, right? And this is what makes us worth something as people when we have all of this. And I'm going to give you one more. There's actually a couple of more. I mean, there's no need to just put them all up here. You get the idea. The communication. Some people who think about this kind of stuff, they talk about the ability to have preferences. In other words, to be able to discern. And when we're talking about morality, we're not just talking about issues. It does include that. It includes issues of right and wrong, but it also includes issues of what is appropriate and what's not. Let me give you an example. So here's a family sitting at the table, and one of the kids gets off of their chair to go get a fork because they dropped their fork, and they slip and fall and bust their head open on the concrete floor, and now the blood is gushing out. I mean, you know what? It is morality that causes a father and a mother to stop and grab their son and minister first aid and get him to the hospital and get sewed up, instead of sitting there saying, we'll look at it when I'm finished. See, there's a mental thing going on there. That's part of morality, being able to make right moral decisions about what should be. All right, so anyway, I was taught that all of these things. Now, here's the word that this is used. These are, well, I call them attributes, but to the people who actually do this, they call these the capacities that we have. And we can use that terminology, and that's fine. These are the things that make it worth having certain rights and certain protections. But there's a big problem with this. And so I want to walk through this with you. And I want to say, first of all, and I'm just going to talk about a couple of issues. I don't know where anybody is on this. I really don't have these kinds of discussions not with the people here in this church that are here physically, or with the folks that are on Zoom. I really don't enter into this, but I just want to give you an idea of the rationale that is behind things. So this is not a new thing, but let's take the issue of abortion, and then we're going to take the issue of the senile, and then we're going to take the issue of the the metal. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, people who are metal. That's not good. It's not good. You go to the airport and things happen. Okay. Mental. No, I mean, they're. I'm talking about they're. Okay, mental capacity. Thank you. Their mental capacity is impinged in some way, or someone who has been injured. It may be like, I'm just give you an example. They're in a coma. Okay, any of that. We're going to take all of these issues, and I want to show you something. When an infant, when a woman is carrying a baby, no matter where it is along the way, is that baby sentient? By the way, what do you notice about these? These all have something in common. Did you notice what they all have in common? All of them. These are all brain functions. Did you notice that? Every one of them's a brain function. Now, I know some of you that have been down this road before, especially if you're trying to defend a different point of view, will say, well, you left off a couple of really important ones, Brother Mike. I did, but I'm not going to leave them out of our discussion. Just those three are not brain functions. We're going to get to those. But these are all brain functions. Which means that when a baby is in the womb, I mean, does it have a sense of morality? It doesn't yet have a brain in the early stages. And so, and even when it does, before it's born, does it have a consciousness? Is it self-aware? I mean, here I am, and is there a communication ability there? And we're not just, does it have the ability to express preferences? Would it even know what that is, and could it communicate with you about it? Well, the answer is no. And by the way, if this is the way that you measure who is worthy of rights and protections, who has a certain human dignity and respect, if that's the way you measure it, then you know what? Then you could abort a fetus and there would be no consequence to that because they don't qualify. But when someone gets old and they lose their mental faculties, they've lost their memories, and they can't reason, and you know what? They can't identify people anymore, and some of them cannot, and they lose certain of these, then you know what? They also no longer qualify for rights and protections. How about someone who has a mental incapacity? They no longer qualify for rights and protections. And if you've been injured and you're in a coma, you don't have any of this, or you may not have any of it functioning. You may hear some. It depends on the coma, doesn't it? Some people hear things going on, but do they have the ability to communicate or express preferences or talk about the No, they don't. And some folks don't hear what's going on. And by the way, this is how the image of God got taught to me. This is the image of God, that God shared His attributes. These are called, in the theological world, communicable attributes. There's your great theological term for the day. Communicable attributes. That God is intelligent, and He gave man intelligence. God has rationality. He gave man that. Look, there's another one up here. How about this one? Emotions. And they say, so this is what is in the image of God. And they would say, and because of that, guess what? We pray, and you never see animals praying. If you listen way back to the stuff that I did before, and I hope you don't, but if you listen to that, it was that was taught to me way back there that made me think, you know what, the real difference between us and monkeys is monkeys will never sit down at a typewriter and put out a Shakespearean play. Monkeys will not invent a telephone. Monkeys will not develop an alphabet. And then a way to express that in words with sounds. A verbal language, and then from that develop a written language. That's what differentiates us from the animal kingdom. And so God, did all of this, and so that's the image of God. It is true that God gave us those communicable attributes. Now, by the way, why are they called communicable attributes? What is communicable? What is that about? It's something that's contagious. It's something you can get from someone else, right? Right? Does God have any attributes that are not communicable? Give me one. Okay, he actually is righteous in and of himself. All right, what else?
Omniscient.
He's omniscient. What else? He's omnipotent. What else? He's omnipresent. But you understand, God can't make another God exactly like him. Because the very fact that God would be created would disqualify him. You see what I'm saying? So you have attributes of God that you and I will never, ever possess, which is why we'll never be God. But there are communicable attributes in which God says, now you can carry on life. By the way, you know why he gave those to you? So that you could carry on life as his imagers. But I want to go back to this, because I was taught this is what the image of God was. And I'm going to say, if that's the image of God, then all of these people are in trouble. And there are even people who say, if you're in this condition, you have lost the image of God. And I'm going to tell you that is not taught in your Bible. You don't lose the image of God because you don't have this. And I've already given you the key to that. I don't know if you reached back in your mind to the first lesson and made that connection, but I told you, yeah, it's in your DNA. If you are human, you are in the image of God. Period. That's all it takes. See, if God has another creature that he designed to be something, then all it has to do is be that creature, and it is that something. Well, this is us, and this is our something. Okay, so with that in mind, let me walk you through this. So here's how I see. So I'm going to use the abortion one, not because it's a hot button topic. I really don't like to get into those in a public forum, because it gets us away from what we're after. But I'm trying to show you how not thinking about this properly leads you down the wrong path. So once a woman has conceived, and I don't know how you say this. I meant to look it up, but I was so busy rewriting my notes. I don't know if that's a zygote or a zygote. I would say goat, but because of the E on the end. But I could, Okay. Once a woman is conceived and a zygote has been produced, and you say, well, what is a zygote? Well, I started to put up a slide of this because it's really kind of incredible. But a zygote is a cell that is formed when a female egg has been fertilized. It is just a single cell. You understand? One cell. As soon as that zygote genome is formed, here's what happens. So let me draw this cell. So here's the zygote. Okay, this is a single cell of fertilized egg, and now you know what is in that? In that is the first stage. There is no stage before that. This is the first stage. When you get to here, you are officially pregnant. What is in that is 100% of the DNA of the male and the female. You're never going to get any more DNA that is in that cell right there. It's all there. That is an incredible thing, isn't it? And so I'm going to read through this because I crafted this very carefully. Someone in the medical community may take issue with my looseness of terminology, but just talking to you about it out of my vocabulary. The zygote genome is a combination of DNA from both partners, and it contains, and by the way, I'm not making this up, this is out of the medical journals, all the genetic information necessary to form a new individual organism in that single cell. In multicellular organisms, the zygote is the earliest and first developmental stage. That single cell all of a sudden begins to split itself in half. And then those halves begin to split themselves into half. And now you go from one cell to two and to four. And you know what's happening? As this, now, and the body's pretty remarkable. It knows, because when that's happening, this cell, or now cells, is actually moving down the fallopian tubes. And when it gets into the uterus, this cell will attach itself to the uterine wall. And then it will keep growing. Now you understand that all of the DNA is already there. Now, by the way, is this cell praying? Is this cell, does it have conscience and morality? Does it have measurable intelligence? No, it doesn't have any of that. You know what it does have? All of the DNA that makes it human. It has 100% of that. And so, I'm going to keep reading here because I want to get all this right. By the time that the zygote attaches itself to the uterine wall, it may be divided into 6 cells. But here's my question. How conscious is the zygote? It doesn't yet have a brain, so how intelligent is it? How sentient is it? Is it praying to God? Which emotions does it possess? What morals does the zygote subscribe to? Have you ever communicated with one? I'm not criticizing the zygote. I'm criticizing the theology that wrongly identifies the image of God and criticizing the society that denies the image of God. Here's my point. If you think killing someone else is wrong because human life is sacred, because you think human life is sacred, it is because we are in the image of God. That's what makes human life sacred. If you think the image of God is any of those things that we just mentioned, and see, this is what I got taught in Bible college. If you think this is what the image of God is, you just made a big pro-choice argument for abortion. Do you see what I'm saying to you? Is it important to identify what the image of God really is? Because to truly be of human value and dignity is not this. By the way, I do want to say this, and I don't want to take a long time to do it. Oh, brother. This is all, none of this is true for this baby that's in the womb. Let me ask you a question. If a baby is born and it's 2 days old, and you bring it home, and someone kidnaps your baby, and through their either intent or neglect, it dies. What is that? But wait, it still doesn't have any of this. See, if that's how you're defining it, even a newborn baby doesn't qualify. Yet we all know that would be wrong, but not according to the definition that the secularists have given us. Do you know why that baby who still doesn't have those things, why it deserves rights and protections? For the same reason it deserved them when it was in that condition in its mother's womb. Because it is made in the image of God. That is what gives it the dignity and the deservingness of all of those things. By the way, do animals have emotions? Do animals have intelligence? You know, it was interesting. They did a study between toddlers and chickens and found that chickens were smarter. They did. And so I'm just saying, so like are chickens now deserving of rights but not toddlers? I mean, I'm just looking at how we're measuring all of this. No, that's a little, I know. So, and are animals now in the image of God because they exhibit some of these? Well, the answer is no. All right, so look, I know the buzzer went off, so I gotta just get through this. So they do. Yeah, okay, and that, okay, here's the thing. We think that's right, but how do we know that's right? We don't. We think we know. We think that's right, and I wouldn't argue with that because I don't know that that's not correct. It's the only thing is, I don't know how you would know that. There are some really interesting things that are being done with animal behavior in which they put these electrodes on animals, they get them to do certain tasks, and then they measure what's going on in their prefrontal cortex, so to speak, of an animal brain and what's going on, you know, back in other areas of the brain. And it's there's some pretty interesting stuff, and that's another whole thing I ripped out of there and threw off to the side. So, okay, so now here's the other three things I want to mention. Someone says, yeah, but what you don't have up here, Brother Mike, is that an animal doesn't have a soul. Yeah, it does. Job 1 says every living thing has a soul. By the way, you understand what makes up a soul, right? Yeah, mind, will, and emotion. Do you know any animals that have a will? Do you have any? I mean, a mind, will, and emotion. Every animal has that. Job says every living thing has that. If you're talking about a spirit, yeah, but they don't have a spirit. All right, so let's just take a look. Who knoweth the spirit of man that goeth upward, and the spirit of the beast that goeth downward to the earth? Oh, well, it looks like they do. So if they both have a spirit, why is one going up and one's going down? Because one is the image. Big difference. Yeah, but in Adam, God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Do you know what we assign some spooky, mystical thing with that. You know what that means? He started breathing. You say, I don't believe that, Brother Mike. All right, well, will you believe the Bible? Here's Genesis 7. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both the fowl and cattle and beasts, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land died. God says every one of those were given the breath of life. Please, do not take a vague verse and create a doctrine out of that that doesn't stand up with the rest of your Bible. Number 8, let me just give it to you. A proper understanding of God will tell us, number 1, how God sees us, and number 2, how God sees everything else. Look, when I get you the notes, I'm going to let you read a little bit about this. I'm not going to cover the whole thing here. But look, as his image, as God's image, we labor with him to complete the task that he wants accomplished. It was that way in the garden. God assigned Adam and Eve tasks that they would accomplish in the garden. And by the way, this is how God will give the whole world the kind of life that God designed for it to have. And if you're following the doctrine about this image thing, you'll understand that this language is used all throughout the Bible. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 4. In whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the, wait a minute, what? You know what he was? He was the perfect image. Because he was not only the image by virtue of the fact that he was born into the human race, he was perfectly functioning as that image. And so, you know what Christ is? He's the representative of God on earth. So when they come to him one day and they say this, they say, show us the Father. John says, no man has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him. He says, no man has seen God at any time. But when they came to Jesus and said, show us the Father, look what it says in John 14. Jesus saith unto him, have I been with you so long time with you, and yet thou hast not known me, Philip? He that hath seen me hath what? Seen the Father. How is that possible? Because he's the reflection of the Father. If you've seen me, you've seen him. If you've seen me, you've seen his glory. If you've seen me, you've seen his character. If you've seen what I do, you've seen what he does. He is the express image of God. And by the way, it is God's will that all of us as images have a final destination. And that is to be what? Romans chapter 8 verse 29. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the what? Image of his Son. So does that mean we all look like Jesus? No. But this is true about every human, that they are made in the image of God. And I give you some references. We're going to skip that was for the believing remnant. It was true about them too, that one day they were going to be like him. But I want to take you down 2 Corinthians 3:18. But we all with open face beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord are changed into the same image from glory to glory. As your edification takes place, you know what is happening? You are being changed from one level of glory in his image to another level of glory in his image. That's why we talk about Christ in you, and talk about the life of Christ in us, and talk about being edified unto godliness. Okay, so I'm going to skip a bunch of notes here where I'm going to talk about free will. You know what? I don't want to skip it. Just give me a minute. I know it's a long session, and I apologize for that. But this issue of free will, I just have to address that here. When we talk about God giving us these attributes, there's something else that he gave us. We're going to cover this in the next book that comes out on justice. Not the one we'll start next week, but the one that comes after that. Let's talk about this issue of free will. Because when God was giving us certain attributes so that we could be like him in the areas that we can't. No, we cannot be omniscient. We cannot be omnipresent. We cannot be eternal, existent from the beginning. But in those areas that he is making us like him, by these communicable capacities, okay, because it's like him, we have to be given free will. You understand that? When the Calvinist denies that man has free will, then what they have just said is what God was designing men to be, they can never be. Because in order to be that, they have to possess free will. I'm going to make a very difficult entry on your note taker, but I need to set it up. You cannot eliminate free will because then you wouldn't be like him. Free will is essential to the whole concept of God's image. Does God know what's going to happen if he gives man free will? Does he know? He is God, so he knows. Does he? And you know what he does? He does it anyway. I didn't go, I guess I skipped this in those notes. People want to look around the world and they want to criticize God for the things that are going on, but you need to understand the goal that God had for everybody was to live in a paradise where all these things, all these sufferings, and all these evils would not have existed for us. But you know what? Man was given a free will. And because he was given a free will, he abused the good gifts that were given to him. And when he did, all of these things entered. So don't blame God for that. We blame ourselves. We're the ones that got us in this mess. If you want to blame God for something, blame him for giving you life, even though he knew the things that would happen. You can blame him for that. So here's the point to put on your note taker. The sufferings which resulted from God's decision to make us free moral agents was better than not having us at all. The sufferings that resulted from God's decision to make us free moral agents was better than not having us at all. Because that would have been the only recourse. If God has to give you a free will, then guess what? The only way to keep you from messing it up, to keep mankind from messing it up, is to not have mankind. Anybody here was an old X-Files fan? Okay, one of you. There was a very interesting episode of the X-Files where Scully and, come on, who's the other one? Mulder, thank you. See, you knew. Mulder and Scully, they discover a genie rolled up in a carpet. And so when Mulder figures out it's a genie, the genie goes, okay, you get 3 wishes. And so you know what he does? He does one of the classics. He says, I'm wishing for world peace. And then when Mulder steps out of the room, everybody's gone. And he goes running down the street, Scully! Scully! No, it's just him. Everybody's gone. So I guess the lesson is be careful what you wish for. If you're the genie, what's your next wish? So anyway, the point that I'm making here is, even though God looked down and saw all of the things that would happen, and by the way, he sees it all. If you're brokenhearted over things that you see, imagine how brokenhearted he is. He sees it all, and for all time. And yet, God knew that it was better than not having us at all. So there is a whole set of notes for that, and I want to tell you that it's important that you read those and that you get that. And there's a lot to say about that. There is this idea, it's the last thing I'll talk to you about, and I've skipped all these notes at the end. I hate this because this is all really important. Because now this is trying to apply this to the things that make us look at each other differently as God's imagers, and how important we are and how we ought to value and esteem ourselves. Not just as his imagers, but you understand, but you know what? We're people who are now beginning to function out of that image. And how great is that? So when you talk about Romans 12:3, for us not thinking of ourselves more highly than we ought to think. You know what? Now it's real easy to look out and go, everybody is an image. So I'm not intrinsically better. Here's the next part. That God dealt to every man the measure of faith. And that image is tied into that assignment that God has given to every man. When you talk about treating each other with tender, loving kindness because we're part of the same body, but guess what? We all were created to perform the same job, to be His representative and His reflection to the world. And how important are those people? So when we yell at our spouse, or when we do what? You know what? You're yelling at one of His imagers. Stop it. More dignity than that. When we say critical things, we have to stop that, because now we're criticizing His image. This is somebody. Look, if the Apostle Paul came in here, we'd all love to sit around the table and talk with him. But if we're on the way out and Clifford says, he don't seem like too much to me, you know what you'd be thinking? Clifford, that's the Apostle Paul, man. Put a lid on that. Well, you know what? That's the way we ought to be thinking about each other as the image of God. About the time we think we're going to be critical, I mean, this will change the way we think. It's certainly changing the way I think. About now, you know what? What are we doing? We're criticizing. And you say, well, they're worthy of criticism because yeah, but there's a position they hold. I'm not saying you don't acknowledge when something isn't being done right. Of course, you don't stick your head in the sand, but we turn it into a personal deal. We disagree with someone's theology, that's one thing, but then we go, and you ever notice he has little rat eyes? Well, that's not an argument. That's the part I'm talking about. Just stop that. You ever notice his ears? Looks like a cab going down with his doors open. No, that's not it. So there is this idea that because God foreknew all of those things, and because He is sovereign, then He ordained all of those things. So I'm going to show you one story in your Bible to show you that that's not true. And then we'll fill in the last thing we'll do is fill in that last point of your note taker, because this is what we're working on right here. The Calvinist says that if God foreknew that evil was going to happen in the world, then He ordained it to happen, because He is sovereign, He is in control of everything. And that's why they think you don't really have free will. You think you do, but you don't. God is in control of everything. And then they quote a verse like Romans 8:29. For whom He did foreknow, He also did predestinate. So they say if God foreknew it, He predestinated it. Now we've been through that verse before, and you know that's not what that's talking about. But let me take you back to the Old Testament. I'm going to take you back to 1 Samuel, and I'm going to show you something here where David is on the run from Saul. He's got a band of about 600 guys with him, but Saul has a whole army, and he's trying to hunt David down, find out where he is all the time. Well, David is in Judah, and he's hiding out with this band of men. But then he hears about the Philistines attacking one of the cities of Judah. It's the city of Keilah. Now, you probably never heard of that city, but let me introduce it to you by showing you the text, and then we'll look at a map. Then they told David, saying, behold, the Philistines fight against Keilah, and they rob the threshing floors. You know what the threshing floors are? That's the storehouses for all the harvest of all the things that they had planted all summer long. The Philistines are cutting. You know what they're actually doing? They're stealing all their food for the rest of the year when there's no growing season. Verse 2, therefore David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go and smite these Philistines? And the Lord said unto David, go and smite the Philistines and save Keilah. And David's men said unto him, behold, we be afraid here in Judah. How much more then if we come to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines? David's men are saying, hey, we're already at risk just being down here in Judah. If we're going to go over to Keilah, we're going to put ourselves out in the open and advertise where we are. Saul is going to find us. Let me just give you a reference of how you see this. If you look, forget about the little red balloon on that. Look down at from the red balloon, look down about the 4 or 5 o'clock position, and you'll see Keilah down below and to the right. There's Keilah. By the way, look up at the top left. Do you see that city up there? Gath? Does that remind anybody of any that reminds you of anybody?
Goliath.
Yeah, Goliath of Gath. This is Philistine territory. Let me give you one more map. Now you'll see the same thing. You'll see Keilah down about to the left of the middle of the Red Sea over toward Philistia, and then you'll see Gath right up inside Philistia. Do you see that? So that's where Keilah is. So it's not in Philistia, but they're going to be located, and they know that they're going to be in danger when they get there. So David goes back to the Lord, and he asks them again. And here it is, 1 Samuel 23:4. Then David inquired of the Lord yet again, and the Lord answered him and said, Arise, go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistines into thine hand. So David and his men went to Keilah and fought with the Philistines and brought away their cattle and smote them with a great slaughter. So David saved the inhabitants of Keilah. And now we're going to pick this up in verse 7. We're just skipping one verse. And it was told Saul that David was come to Keilah. Yeah, his guy's spies out there. And Saul said, God hath delivered him into mine hand, for he is shut in by entering into a town that hath gates and bars. And Saul called all the people together to war to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men. You know what a siege is. If you've got a city that has gates and walls and bars, all you have to do is put your army all the way around. You cut off all the food and water going in, and here's what you say to the inhabitants of the city. You get your food and water when we get David. So David, now Saul knows, and David suspects, because he's down there, that Saul may have found out. So he's going to inquire to the Lord about two things. He's going to ask the Lord, is Saul going to come to Keilah? And if he does, will the people of Keilah give me up? And after all, he just delivered them from the Philistines, right? So let's read it. 23:10, Then said David, O Lord God of Israel, thy servant hath certainly heard that Saul seeketh to come to Keilah to destroy the city for my sake. Will the men of Keilah deliver me up into his hand? Will Saul come down as thy servant hath heard? O Lord God of Israel, I beseech thee, tell thy servant. And the Lord said, he will come down. Then David said, will the men of Keilah deliver me and my men into the hand of Saul? And the Lord said, they will deliver thee up. If you're David, what are you thinking you should do? Huh? Get out of Dodge, right? That's right. David does exactly what y'all would do. Here it is. Then David and his men, which were about 600, arose and departed out of Keilah and went whithersoever they could go. And it was told Saul that David was escaped from Keilah, and he forbare to go. So here's my point. Did God foreknow if Saul would come down to Keilah? Did God foreknow that the people in Keilah would give David up? But guess what? Did God ordain for that to happen? The answer is no, because neither one of those things actually happened. Saul never went to Keilah because he heard David was gone. The people never delivered David up because he didn't stick around. Point 10. Foreknowledge does not necessitate predestination. You cannot charge God with evil about the things he foreknew. Did God know men would abuse his gifts with their free will? Yes. Does that mean he ordained it? No. He did not. So I'd like to end this today, and I appreciate your patience, to just say all the things that are in Romans 12 that we have been looking at, and I wish it's in your notes, and I wish I'd taken the time to talk about them more. But if we begin to treat each other with the mindset of what it means to be in the image of God and how important those people are and how we ought to value and esteem them, it would change the way we treat them. And you know what this does to me? This adds to this whole identity of, yes, we're part of the body, and yes, we're family, and yes, we're kin, and all of that kind of stuff. But there is something that just because we are human that God has decided he wants to do with us. And that means every lost person I want to witness to, you know what I know? They are in the image of God. That is their job, whether they ever do it or not. That's what they were designed to do. And you know what I'm witnessing to? I'm witnessing to the fact that if they come to Christ, they can begin to function in accordance with who they have been made to be. That means with all the people that I know in my life, I have to take them seriously because they are all in the image of God. So when the Bible talks about patiently enduring persecution, you know what? That's coming from another imager. Nope, they're not thinking about it like that, and they're not trying to be the image of God, but that's how my Father's looking at them. So you know what? Although I don't like what they're doing, I am going to respect the office that God has put them in simply because they are a human. And I am going to deal with them out of that. There's a lot of ways in your notes that I'm going to take you back into Romans 12 and talk to you about how this knowledge greatly enhances your ability to do all of these difficult things, to bless them that persecute you, and to patiently endure tribulation, and to not think of ourselves more highly than we ought. All those kinds of things. This plays directly into that. I wish I had taught you this before. If I'd known it before, I would have. But now I do, so here we are. Again, I'm subscribing to better late than never, which seems to be the motto of my life. But, you know what? I want to do it now, because what is there yet sitting ahead for us that this will still tie into? So better for us to get it now. All right, let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we love you, and we are grateful that in your wisdom, when you decided to make mankind, this was your choice for representing you and reflecting you to the whole creation. And I know, Lord, that if we had lived that way and done what you ask us to do, the kind of lives that we're living today would not be fraught with all the kinds of evils and sufferings that we have to endure all the time, but it would be the fullness of what it means to be one of your creatures. It would be the absolute glory and fullness of what it means to be in the image of God. And I am grateful, Lord, for that honor to be bestowed upon us all, and may we think about that as we live our lives each day, that we reflect you and your character and your glory, and we represent you to the whole creation. All that sees us, may they see you. We pray in Christ's name. Amen.